What is it about shame that inevitably leads to self-destruction? Maybe it's easy to just boil it down to hurt people, but there has to be more to it than that. I don't think villains ever know that they're the villain. I don't think selfish people ever think of themselves as inherently selfish. It's funny. Somehow the most harmful people stay oblivious to their own malice while the ones trying to be good compulsively question their own motives. Maybe it unveils a deeper question though. If all of that is true, where do the minds of good and evil people really diverge? What makes the difference, and do truly evil and good people even exist at all? Could it ever be that simple? We don't often think of ourselves as bad people, but I'd be lying if I said I never crossed that internal line a time or two. I find it fascinating how the safeguards we build to protect us from the fallout of life's tribulations, once expired, become the very doom we manifest in the end. In other words, maybe it is possible to have too much of a good thing. Once those safeguards become limitations and the emotional body shields become straitjackets, it's impossible to predict how they can sabotage our growth in the aftermath. Like a Trojan horse that keeps you protected from the dangers of the external, but slowly disintegrates your peace of mind from the inside out. Nothing good lasts forever. It's the universe's worst kept secret, one that we've all internalized but choose to ignore anyway. Maybe I'm thinking too hard about it, but it's a bit unsettling to realize how much power the unconscious mind has over us. Unhealed trauma you locked in a chest and lost the key for, a display case of a million tiny experiences with no significance of their own, but an uncontrollable monster when put in the same room with each other that all culminate into the underlying blueprint of your identity, and you had no say in the matter. Would it have been a good thing if you did? I guess what I'm really getting at is, the way I see it, most of us had no control over the person we became. If your identity is simply a sum of sensory input filtered through a biological algorithm making sense of the data in the background, what credit can you really take? I'm not saying we have no agency, but it's dizzying to realize how much of who you are wasn't consciously chosen. That real change takes gaming the system, learning the rules of your own chemistry, and finding a way to beat yourself at your own game. As a boy, I always wondered why the villain in a movie couldn't obviously see that what they were doing was wrong. It's interesting how, as I've grown up, I've actually started to relate to and empathize with a lot of them. A lot of the time, they weren't inciting chaos for the sake of the chaos. They were hurt by something, someone. They felt betrayed, lied to, they felt abandoned. But shame has a way of wearing purpose like a costume. Old wounds masquerading as moral convictions. I wasn't being guided towards something meaningful. I was being guided away from feeling. That friction is what kept love at arm's length and ultimately became the canon of M for my own villain arc. The self-sabotage that facilitated the destruction of everything I should have held close. I wasn't always the hero of my own story. I think to some degree, everyone is their own main character, but there's a fine line between productive introspection and plain self-indulgence that's far too easy to cross. I've hurt a lot of people. Never out of malice, but because the people I loved always somehow became collateral damage left in the wake of my mistakes while I followed my own internal code, truly believing it was taking me someplace important, someplace good. Thought I was following my purpose, my meaning for life, my destiny, and it really felt as though that was the case. As it turns out, emotions aren't half as reliable as they lead on, and it's possible my emotions were just programmed responses, chemical reactions and a byproduct of how my nervous system was developed from a young age. And if that was the case, where was I ever really heading? Perception to that degree can be consciously altered in some way, and it effectively changes how I receive data from the external world and how I respond to it. That I was never serving a higher, eternal purpose bestowed upon me. I was simply living according to my latest whimsy. Pain, suffering, agony I had yet to process and internalize, secretly directing the tide in subtle yet powerful directions, all serving an expired and painfully outdated mission. Protect myself from suffering at all costs. I always thought of myself as brave and courageous. Turns out it was a front for how scared and cowardice I truly was under the surface. I can't say it was anything less than fascinating and a bit brutal to meet the other half of myself. A half I didn't really know existed. secrets I'd kept from myself, revealing my true motives underneath, and it only took self-sabotaging everything good for me to finally turn around and face the inner demon I was unknowingly running from. And when I finally did, I wasn't angry. I wasn't resentful. I was disappointed. Disappointed to know I could ever sever from the pain of my experience so deeply in a desperate attempt at self-protection that I abandoned myself in the process, leaving that kid to fend for himself, heal from it, all on his own. I don't know if true evil exists. I like to think people are far more complex than a single label, but then again, we can only ever meet others at the depth of which we've met ourselves. I choose to see the light shining faintly behind people's apparent darkness because I think we owe each other at least that much. We never made it this far because we were flawless, perfect, data processing machines. We survived by helping each other aim for something bigger than ourselves. Maybe perfection exists, but it's the complexities and nuances of imperfection that make us human. You could spend your whole life looking for the man that's done no wrong, and you'd be searching forever because humanity doesn't live in perfection. It lives in the gray areas, the messy space between instinct and morality. It lives in our capacity to feel pain and still choose forgiveness, to look inward and see the disaster beneath our skin and offer ourselves empathy regardless. At least I like to think so. We all want to be good, but maybe good isn't as simple as it is in the comic books you read or what you see on TV. Maybe it's being the messy, unpolished, flawed person we all are and choosing to be better tomorrow than you were yesterday. We're not robots, and AI isn't a threat to our humanity because we have one thing it can't mimic: desire. The desire to try. The desire to be good. You could spend an eternity digging into the never-ending pool of infinite possibilities that it is, but maybe to try. Maybe that's a good enough place to start.